By the late 1930s, aviation had become a high-stakes obsession with pure, violent speed. Engineers were building sleek, silver monoplanes designed to cut through the clouds with absolute precision. But to understand how we actually arrived at those aerodynamic marvels, we have to rewind to May 1909 and travel to a muddy farm in Picardy, France. This is where brothers Gaston and René Caudron spent their days. They were local farmers, but they spent their time studying the birds of the Somme Bay and analyzing the structural designs of early flight pioneers like Otto Lilienthal. They had the ambition to fly, and they had managed to construct a basic wooden glider frame right there on their property. The only problem was they lacked the single most important component, an engine. Rather than wait for a motor that hadn't arrived, they improvised. They hooked their glider up to their farm mare, a horse named Lucielle, and used her to tow the aircraft until it caught enough wind to lift a few hundred meters into the air. That short horse-drawn flight proved their design worked. But the real challenge standing between the Caudron brothers and history was figuring out how to take that rustic farmyard experiment and scale it into a mass-producing industry. The brothers moved fast. Within a year of that test flight, they abandoned the farm, built a dedicated aircraft factory in the nearby town of Roux, and opened a civilian aviation school at Le Crotoy. In September 1914, the progression of German troops forced the brothers to relocate production to Lyon. This pivot transformed aviation into an urgent military requirement for reconnaissance and bombing raids. To meet the scale of the conflict, the Caudron factory began mass-producing the G4 biplane. This required a vast expansion of human labor, assembling hundreds of fragile wooden frames piece by piece on massive factory floors. But this rapid industrialization carried a brutal human cost. In 1915, while piloting the new R4 prototype, a 3-seat plane he had been developing, Gaston Caudron crashed and died for France. Gaston's death left René to manage the booming wartime factory alone. The pressure of the war had proven that expanding their footprint required sacrificing not just their resources, but the founders themselves. With the war over, René focused on the civilian market, expanding his schools to cultivate a new generation of pilots who would buy and fly his aircraft. This animation shows his solution, a pipeline of new aviation schools across France. By 1939, this infrastructure trained 9,000 pilots. These schools were open to students typically excluded from military aviation, including women like Adrienne Boland, who would later fly over the Andes. In 1921, the school at Le Crotoy trained Bessie Coleman, allowing her to become the first African-American licensed pilot after she was denied training in the United States. René secured his legacy by building the